Hello and welcome to the Unseen Question. From the moment human beings started telling stories, they also started building gods. These gods weren't just figures in the sky, they were ways to explain the unknown, to make sense of storms, sickness, death, and all the frightening mysteries that early people had no tools to understand. When lightning struck, it wasn't physics, it was Zeus. When crops failed, it wasn't soil depletion or pests. It was punishment from a spirit who demanded sacrifice. Religion was, at its core, humanity's first attempt at science, politics, and morality all wrapped into one. That might sound poetic, but it's also practical. People lived in small tribes, surrounded by dangers they couldn't control. A story about invisible beings gave order to chaos. It gave rules that bonded people together, even when those rules were brutal or irrational. If everyone feared the same gods, everyone followed the same laws. But notice what's happening there. It's people making rules and attaching divine authority to them. No god ever stepped down from the sky with a contract. It was always a priest, a shaman, a prophet, a king. Humans declaring that their words came from something higher. The pattern repeats across the world. The Aztecs said the sun needed human blood to rise. Ancient Egyptians built massive temples for Osiris and Ra. Hindus wove countless gods into their stories of creation and destruction. Norsemen told of Odin and Thor battling giants. The list is endless. Different names, different rituals, but the same underlying function. Human beings creating meaning in the face of fear, uncertainty, and the need for control. And here's the striking part. If a god had truly revealed himself, why would every culture invent completely different ones? Why would one group believe the divine loves animal sacrifice, while another insists he hates it? Why would one say there are hundreds of gods, and another say there is only one? The diversity of belief itself is strong evidence that religion is not coming from outside humanity. It's coming from inside our minds. Psychology gives us some answers here. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We evolved to connect dots, even when no real connection exists. If rustling in the grass might be a predator, it's safer to assume it is, rather than risk being eaten. This instinct to assume agency everywhere, that something or someone is behind every unexplained event, is deeply wired into us. Over time, that instinct grew into stories of spirits, gods, demons, angels. The brain isn't built to leave things as random. It needs an agent, a will, a purpose. That's why religions often describe gods who act very much like humans: angry, jealous, loving, forgiving, vengeful. They reward loyalty, punish betrayal, demand rituals. In other words, gods are mirrors, reflections of human psychology projected onto the sky. Now, you might hear the counter-argument, but billions of people believe in God. Doesn't that prove something? But numbers don't make truth. Billions of people once believed the Earth was the center of the universe. Billions believed disease was caused by curses or bad air. People are incredibly good at sharing convincing illusions. The scale of belief doesn't confirm reality. It only confirms how powerful stories can be. Consider how religions spread. A charismatic leader claims special knowledge. He convinces a community. That community raises children to accept it as unquestionable truth. Children grow up with the belief already embedded in them before they ever question it. And by the time they're adults, that belief feels as natural as breathing. That's not divine revelation. That's social conditioning. And when societies change, so do their religions. The ancient Greeks no longer worship Zeus. The Norse no longer make sacrifices to Odin. Egyptians don't pray to Ra. The gods that once inspired temples and wars now survive only in myths. But at their time, they were just as real to their followers as today's gods are to believers. Doesn't that suggest that current religions are also temporary, bound to fade just like the rest? And notice something else. When gods fade away, they don't leave behind evidence of their existence. There are no broken thrones of Zeus lying on mountaintops, no ancient skeletons of giants Thor supposedly fought, no cosmic signatures of angels, demons, or divine battles. What we do find are human artifacts, carvings, scrolls, temples, statues. In other words, the fingerprints are always human. The Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, the Book of Mormon, These are not the voice of the universe. They're written documents in human languages filled with human biases, contradictions, and cultural assumptions. You can tell the authors were men of their time by the things they cared about: slavery, land disputes, ritual purity, tribal warfare. You don't see any mention of microbes, galaxies, or quantum mechanics. Yet if an all-knowing being were behind these texts, wouldn't the knowledge go beyond what the local shepherd or merchant could imagine? This is one of the clearest signs religion is a human invention. The so-called holy texts never contain knowledge beyond their cultural setting. They explain the world in the limited, flawed ways people of that era understood it. What people didn't know, they filled with stories of miracles and divine will. That's not divine wisdom. That's mythology doing its best to make sense of the unknown. Let's take a closer look at morality. Many argue religion gave humanity ethics, that without gods, people would descend into chaos. But history shows morality is older than religion. Even primates show fairness, empathy, cooperation. Wolves care for wounded pack members. Elephants mourn their dead. Humans evolved with instincts for compassion and fairness because societies collapse without them. Religion simply formalized those instincts, attaching divine punishment and reward to behaviors that were already essential for survival. If morality came strictly from religion, it would have been consistent. But what do we see instead? One religion says killing is wrong, but commands killing outsiders. Another says stealing is evil, but excuses plundering enemies. Another permits slavery, while another bans it. Morality shaped by religion is selective, tribal, and often contradictory. In reality, people created gods to enforce the morals they already preferred. Here's an example. In ancient Israel, texts say God commanded the killing of entire villages, including children, if those people worshipped other gods. Modern believers usually ignore or reinterpret these verses because they clash with current moral standards. But notice what that reveals. The morality of the people judging those verses today is not coming from the scripture. It's coming from their human conscience, shaped by modern society. Religion adapts to morality, not the other way around. And this adaptation is constant. Christian churches once defended slavery with scripture, now they condemn it. Islamic law once treated apostasy as punishable by death. In many places today, it's quietly ignored. Hindu caste rules once dictated untouchability. Today, reform movements fight against it. Religion changes its face to match the culture around it. If morality were truly handed down from an eternal God, it wouldn't shift with human progress. Now, let's think about power. Religion has always been deeply tied to authority. Kings ruled by divine right. Pharaohs were living gods. Popes claimed ultimate authority over emperors. In each case, invoking the divine wasn't about truth, it was about control. If people believe the king rules with God's blessing, rebellion becomes rebellion against heaven itself. That belief keeps populations obedient in ways no sword ever could. Even today, religion is a tool for political power. Leaders appeal to religious identity to win votes. Laws are justified not by reason, but by scripture. Wars are fought with the conviction that God is on our side. Strip away the holy language and it's simply humans using belief as a weapon. But here's the paradox. If religions were truly divine, why would they be so clearly shaped by human culture and politics? Why would they bend to kings, parliaments, and social norms? Why would they evolve, split, and fight each other endlessly over doctrine? The simplest answer is the most obvious, because they were human inventions from the very start. When we look at how religions actually form, a pattern emerges. Small local traditions gradually expand into larger systems as societies grow. Tribal gods become city gods. City gods become national gods. National gods eventually transform into universal gods, claiming authority over all people. This scaling up doesn't point to a divine plan. It points to social evolution. Take Christianity. It began as a tiny sect within Judaism, centered around a charismatic preacher. His followers spread stories, altered them, and adapted them to appeal to new audiences in the Roman world. Over time, what was once a radical offshoot became the official religion of an empire. Not because the heavens demanded it, but because it was politically useful. The Roman state could unify diverse populations under a single faith. The same with Islam. Emerging from tribal Arabia, it offered a unifying identity to groups previously divided by constant feuds. The promise of belonging, law, and order gave it strength. That's why it spread so quickly. Not because it carried cosmic truth, but because it solved immediate human problems. This is important. Religions survive not because they are true, but because they are useful. They provide social glue, identity, and authority. Even if the gods themselves are imaginary, the structures built around them are very real. Now, let's talk about rituals. From an outside perspective, rituals often look bizarre. Burning incense, bowing, chanting, fasting, painting bodies, sacrificing animals. But if you strip away the supernatural explanations, rituals are psychological technologies. They create group cohesion. When everyone performs the same act at the same time, it forges unity. It builds trust. You know who belongs and who doesn't. This is deeply powerful for human survival in groups. Anthropologists studying tribes notice the same effect. Whether it's fire dances, shamanic trances, or collective feasts, the point isn't to please gods. It's to strengthen bonds among people. Religion takes advantage of this natural mechanism and embeds it into culture. The supernatural story is secondary. The real effect is social control and cohesion. And what about prayer? Billions of people kneel, chant, whisper, or sing to the sky every day. But studies show prayers don't alter the external world. No measurable difference occurs whether people pray or not, yet prayer persists because it changes the person doing it. It calms, comforts, and provides an illusion of control. That feeling of being heard, even when no one is listening, is enough to sustain the practice. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of religion, the placebo effect. Just as sugar pills can relieve pain if we believe they are medicine, rituals and prayers can reduce anxiety if we believe they reach a higher power. The belief itself is doing the work. That doesn't make the gods real. It makes the brain astonishingly suggestible. There's also the question of why religions often fixate on sex, food, and purity laws. Why should an all-powerful creator care whether people eat pork, cover their hair, or avoid touching certain fabrics? These obsessions only make sense when you see them as tools for group identity. Shared dietary rules, dress codes, and taboos keep groups distinct. They act as visible markers of belonging. They're not divine commands, they're cultural boundaries dressed in sacred language. Another overlooked point is the role of fear. Fear is one of the most effective motivators in human behavior, and religions exploit it masterfully. Fear of death, fear of punishment, fear of exclusion. The concept of hell, for instance, is a particularly powerful invention. Eternal torture for disbelief ensures compliance. No earthly king could threaten you beyond death, but religion extends authority into the afterlife. That is not divine justice. It's social control perfected. And yet, notice how the specifics of afterlives differ wildly. Ancient Egyptians believed in elaborate journeys with boats and treasures. Vikings dreamed of feasting in Valhalla. Buddhists imagined cycles of rebirth. Christians speak of heaven and hell. The fact that afterlives reflect cultural values rather than consistent reality again shows their human origin. Even within a single religion, concepts of the afterlife evolve. Early Judaism had no clear heaven or hell. Christianity only later developed vivid images of eternal torment. Islam's paradise reflects the cultural environment of early Arabia. Each version of the afterlife serves the hopes and fears of its believers at that time. If religion were truly divine, we would expect universal clarity, not endless diversity. Cognitive science has uncovered even deeper layers of how belief works. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly filling in gaps when information is missing. This ability helps us survive, but it also creates illusions. Shadows become monsters, coincidences become signs, random events become messages. Religion thrives on this mental tendency to over-detect meaning. Researchers call this hyperactive agency detection. When you hear a creak at night, you don't assume it's the wind. You assume it's someone lurking. Better safe than sorry. Multiply that instinct by thousands of years, and you get spirits in the forest, gods in the clouds, demons in the shadows. The mind invents agents where none exist. Another psychological mechanism is theory of mind, our ability to imagine what others are thinking. This ability is so strong that we project minds onto things that don't have them. A car that doesn't want to start. A storm that looks angry. In religion, that projection becomes a universe with a personality, a will, a plan. We turn the cosmos into a mind like our own. And here's something many overlook. The gods people create always share the cultural and personal values of their believers. In societies where warfare is central, gods are warriors. In agricultural societies, gods are tied to fertility, crops, and rain. In modern times, believers describe God in more abstract and moral terms, reflecting today's values. The deity changes shape as human needs change. That alone should make us question the idea of an eternal, unchanging being. History is full of revealing case studies. Take Zoroastrianism, once one of the largest religions in the world. It gave us concepts of heaven, hell, angels, and even Satan, ideas later borrowed by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet today, Zoroastrianism has dwindled to a tiny community. If divine truth were self-evident, how could it vanish so easily? Or think about the cargo cults of the South Pacific in the 20th century. During World War II, local islanders saw planes bringing supplies, food, and technology. To them, this seemed like gifts from gods. They built shrines and runways, performed rituals to attract the planes back. Within a few years, a fully developed religious system emerged from misunderstanding and hope. This is a modern demonstration of how quickly humans can generate religion out of thin air. Another example, the ghost dance movement among Native Americans in the 19th century. Facing cultural collapse and colonization, tribes embraced a new religious prophecy that promised the restoration of their lands and the disappearance of settlers. It spread rapidly because it gave hope. This wasn't revelation from the sky. It was a desperate response to suffering and loss. When we study these cases, the pattern becomes clear. Religion emerges wherever humans face uncertainty, fear, or crisis. It offers comfort, order, and identity. But the source is always human psychology and social need, not divine revelation. And then there's the issue of contradictions within religions themselves. In Christianity alone, there are thousands of denominations, each claiming to follow the true teaching. They can't all be right, but they can all be wrong. The sheer fragmentation shows that what people call God's will is really interpretation layered on interpretation, shaped by human disagreement. Even within a single scripture, contradictions appear. God is described as merciful in one verse, merciless in another, just yet unjust, forgiving yet punishing forever. These aren't qualities of an all-knowing being. They're the fingerprints of multiple human authors, each with their own agendas and emotions. And if we look globally, the most striking fact is that religious belief depends heavily on geography. A child born in India is overwhelmingly likely to grow up Hindu. In Saudi Arabia, Muslim. In Italy, Catholic. In Japan, Shinto or Buddhist. This shows religion isn't about truth discovered through reason. It's about cultural inheritance. People believe what their parents and neighbors believe. If gods were real, geography wouldn't dictate faith. Truth would reveal itself regardless of birthplace. The strongest evidence against divine origin is this. Religions not only differ across cultures, they actively contradict one another. They can't all be right, but they can all be human. And when we zoom out across time, another pattern becomes obvious. Religions rise, dominate, and then decline. Always. The gods of Mesopotamia, once worshipped with fear and reverence, are now museum pieces. The mighty pantheon of Greece and Rome survives only in literature. Even great medieval faiths have splintered, lost influence, or transformed beyond recognition. The cycle keeps repeating. Science has played a massive role in this decline. Once we learned what lightning really is, Zeus became unnecessary. Once we discovered germs, demons stopped causing disease. Once we mapped the cosmos, heaven above the clouds became impossible. Step by step, the natural explanations replaced the supernatural ones. Not because anyone set out to kill gods, but because reality simply didn't match the stories. Yet religion persists, not because it explains reality better, but because it fills emotional needs. It offers community, comfort, and hope in the face of suffering and death. That's powerful, but it doesn't make it true. And here's a deeper point. Facing reality without those stories is difficult. It means accepting that the universe doesn't revolve around us, that there may be no cosmic justice, no ultimate plan, no one keeping score. For some, that feels unbearable. But it can also be liberating, because it means meaning is not handed down from above. It's created by us. Our values, our compassion, our love for one another. These things don't need divine permission to matter. In fact, they matter more because they're ours. When we choose to care for others, to build societies, to protect the planet, we do it not because we fear punishment from a sky god, but because we understand the responsibility we share as human beings. Religion was invented by humans, not gods. That doesn't make it worthless, but it does make it ours to outgrow. Just as children eventually set aside fairy tales, societies can set aside myths that no longer serve them. The real challenge is what we build in their place. And maybe that's the most important message. Meaning doesn't come from ancient texts or supernatural beings. It comes from us, our creativity, our curiosity, our relationships, our drive to explore and understand. That's more awe-inspiring than any holy book, because it's real.